Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to go through all of the books that I read in November. I also DNF'd a lot. I feel like this was the month of me DNFing, but most of them were all the audiobooks that I was trying to read. But anyway, let's get into it. I think we're just going to go in the order that I read the books, not in the order that I liked them. The first one that I finished was this one. This is Bride by Ali Hazelwood. I actually kind of enjoyed this. I was somewhat embarrassed that I enjoyed it so much because I know some people didn't really like it. I liked it and I gave it a 4. I thought it was fine. I actually rated it higher than the other books that I've read from her. The other one I haven't read that I still own is Check and Mate. There was nothing very original about the story, but I just kind of generally enjoyed it. What I will say is it's one of those books, and I think all her books are like this, that is just so easy to read. And you can kind of fill in the gaps because there's not that much description on like what the characters really look like or like how they truly are. So you can fill in the gaps to what you want the character to be. And, there's some spice to it, but I don't know. I think generally I enjoyed it. Was it my favorite book? Absolutely not. But I gave it a 4. It might be a 3.5, like coming to think of it, like after like I've read it and stuff. But at the time I gave it a 4, so I'm going to keep it a 4. Okay, then I decided to DNF this. This is Mistress of Lies by K.M. Enright. So I started this in October and I think I read about 100 pages and I was like, you know what, this is just not for me. Because at first I read the first chapter, I thought initially that it's not for me, but then I kept reading it and I thought, okay, maybe it's actually not so bad. But I think over time, I just got to realize that I really didn't like the main female character in this. I didn't mind Samuel. I think Samuel is the guy. Yeah, Samuel. I thought his story was a little bit more interesting, but we spent so much time with the female character and she is basically a blood worker, so i.e. a vampire. But I never really quite understood how that all worked in terms of the world, because you have the blood workers and then you have the non-blood workers, and there's like this hierarchy, and she's part of this like bloodline of blood workers, whatever. And she ends up in the first chapter killing her father, and then she takes over, and Samuel has this like secret about his blood. He's not a blood worker, but there's some secret behind him, and I thought all that was interesting, but not interesting enough for me to keep reading it, because ultimately I really didn't like the way it was written. I just couldn't get into it. And again, like I said, I just didn't really understand the world that we were in. So obviously my explanation of it probably is incorrect because I just don't grasp what I was reading. It never really explained the difference of a vampire versus a blood worker. Like for me, I'm coming into this book thinking this is about vampires, and they're not called vampires. There's also no specifics about like what a blood worker truly is or does, and how certain people are born blood workers and some are not. So they're not turned, but it didn't make any sense. Like also her brother, like she's a blood worker, but her brother isn't, but they have the same father. Like, I feel like that's a thing too. So how is she a blood worker, but her brother isn't? How does that work? I just don't get it. Vampires for me are created, but they're not in this world. They're like, it just didn't make any sense to me. And I think if there had been more of an explanation as to how it works in the world, then maybe I could have got on board with it, but it just didn't make sense to me and I couldn't figure out what I was reading. I think I'm also at the point where I just don't mind DNFing books. Like I don't read that many books every single month. So for me to waste like a week, 2 weeks on a book that I don't generally enjoy, it's just not worth my time anymore. So by the point that I get to like page 100, if I'm still a little bit iffy about the book, I'm just gonna be DNFing. That's my new motto now. Okay, next up, I did listen to an audiobook. So I listened to The Madman's Hotel by Niall Breslin. I don't actually even think this is a book. Like it was on Audible, so I thought it was a book, but I think it's just an Audible production. But I listened to it. It was very short, like 4 or 5 hours long. It was kind of interesting at first. It was, based on an asylum in Ireland and like the history about it and the corruption and it kind of centered around this one family whose grandmother was in the asylum and put there by her then husband. And it was for like reasons that didn't really make sense in today's world. Like he just said she's crazy, and then people didn't really check her. They just put her in there and she was in there for the rest of her life. Pretty horrific, but this is like true story. And so I thought it was like more like documentary style. And I think, come to think of it, it was a lot of film around towards it. So maybe he was trying to make it a documentary and then it was turned into an audible. I don't really know. So I don't think it was a book, but I did listen to it on Audible, so I'm going to include it here. It was free to listen to, so if you want to listen to that, it's there. Okay, next up, I read Fourth Wing. So this was also audiobook, and I listened to the dramatization because I thought that was really well done, and I actually really enjoyed it. I gave this a 4-star. I thought it was entertaining, and I didn't think it was as bad as everyone said it was. When Fourth Wing was such a big thing, there's so many videos that it was kind of unavoidable for me to watch some of them, some people's critiques about it, like traveling the parapet and all that stuff, and like the romance and everything. But generally, I did manage to not spoil the book for me listening to those, because I would pretty much turn it off if they're going to start talking about spoilers, because there was always something in the back of my head where I kind of was curious, but I also did listen to a lot of videos. So I kind of knew the premise, and I also heard people saying, well, I really like the dragons. I'm like, how can you like a dragon? But now I kind of understand why people like the dragons. So I did give this a 4-star, like I said. I thought it was entertaining. And I thought the ending, or like the last third of the book, was really, really entertaining. There was a lot of action, way more than I expected it to be. I thought it was going to be solely on the romance, and there was quite a lot of action, and I really did enjoy that aspect more than really anything else. And yeah, the ending, I was shocked as everyone else. Like the last page of the book, I'm like, it got me too, because I wasn't expecting it. All right, at the same time, I did pick this up and I was trying to read it. This is the second book in the I can't remember, the Knockmount, the Knockmount series. So I've read the first one, and this is Things We Hide from the Light by Lucy Score, and I think I read like 30 pages and I realized I just can't get into this book. This is like almost 600 pages. This is 560 pages long, and it is a contemporary romance. Why do they need to be this long? Like, a contemporary romance should be 300, 350 max. Like, really, there really isn't a lot that you need to add into these books. And honestly, already by page 30, like, I know it's going to happen. Like, you go into these books, you know it's going to be romance, you know kind of who the main characters are going to be, but there's already it's already just going to happen too soon. I can get the feeling, and also I don't like the characters. They also changed so this is based on the brother of the first book. I really didn't like the man in the first book. I thought the female was fine. I read that whole book, and I think I gave it like a 2.5. It was fine. But I generally hated the man in that book, and I hated his POV. And his brother is in that book, and I much preferred his brother in that book. And this book is about the brother. So I thought, okay, well, maybe I will enjoy this book because I enjoyed the brother better in the other book. But they changed him. Like, he's super depressed in this book. He's not he's just a different person. And so it's hard for me to go into this feeling any kind of way or connection to that character, because they've made him so depressed for the purpose of the story, which is stupid. It just doesn't really make sense. So I didn't like that. I don't like that it's going to be like the ex-girlfriend of his brother. I just think it's a little messy. So I decided to DNF this book. I also just don't like the writing style, and the characters are just stupid. I don't like it. So yeah, I'm also going to be unhauling the third book, because I did buy the whole series when I bought all the books, which is stupid of me. So I will be doing an unhaul video at some point, because I have a lot of books I need to unhaul, and they will be in there. And pretty much all the DNFs that I'm going to be talking about will be in there as well. Okay, next up, I did also read Iron Flame. This was also an audiobook, and you know, right after Fourth Wing, I wanted to listen to it, I wanted to see what happened. And this was such a letdown. I can see why people were let down by this story. I did end up giving it a 3-star ultimately because, you know, it wasn't like a 2, but it was very disappointing just coming off of the first book. I think the first book was good. And I think if you don't have a sequel that is good or better, then you kind of like fail. And I think Iron Flame massively failed. It missed the boat on, you know, it wasn't a cliffhanger the first book, but you do like find out something like core to like you find out something and you're like, what? And so the second book really should be quite impactful, at least for like the beginning part, you know? And I thought that this book was so toxic. Like the relationship, it really had so many pages about Violet and Xaden. Like it was so toxic. Their relationship is just not good. It is not a healthy relationship. And I know people ship them and they want them to be together. I don't care. I actually don't think they should be together. So we will see. Apparently there's 5 books. I don't know if I'm going to read all 5 books, but we'll see. I do think that the ending of Iron Flame was somewhat interesting because something happens. And so it makes us want to read the 3rd book, which comes out in January. And I will be reading the 3rd book because I do want to know what happens. But the 3rd book is no good. I'm going to just like leave the series there because you know, it's more like a one hit wonder at that point. If your first book is your best book, then that's a shame. Maybe just don't do sequels, just do books, just do single books, single storylines. And like, not everything has to have multiple books. I feel like authors don't realize this. I think they do it, and maybe also it's just an issue with the publishing world. Like if a book does really well, they push for a sequel, they push for a series. But if there isn't enough story behind it, or it's like a rush job. Because I feel like Iron Flame felt rushed. If it was a longer book than the first book, but it had like filler pages, you could have like taken out 300 pages of that book, and I think you would have had the same story. So it was definitely a filler book. And yeah, you know, there's always the second book where it tends to feel that way sometimes. And I don't think that's right. Just do a duology in that case, or just don't write, you know, if you don't have enough to write a series, just don't do it. And it's not always about cash grabs. I think sometimes these books can be very cash grabby. So anyway, I did listen to that. And I did spend a couple credits listening to the dramatization because obviously I did it for the Fourth Wing, the first one. So I really wanted to like, you know, I think it helped me get into it. Also, I was in a massive reading slump this month or last month, and the audiobooks really massively helped me get out of it because I really just wasn't wanting to read any physical copies of my books. So anyway, I finished Iron Flame, and then I was still wanting to listen to some books, so I started listening to A Touch of Darkness. This is by Scarlett St. Clair, and this is a Hades and Persephone's retelling, like a dark romantic-y. I wouldn't say it's dark. It's like more of just a romantic-y retelling. I genuinely like this. It kind of caught me by surprise because I think when I first started listening to it, I was like, oh, this is gonna be crap. I really didn't care for the way it was written at first. And even now, I feel like it's probably not written the best way, but I liked it. I did. I gave it a 4-star. I did. It actually could have been a 5-star. I'm not going to lie. I really got roped into the story, but I really didn't like the ending. I thought it was pretty meek and didn't really do anything for me. I'm not going to be reading the other 3 books in the series. I think if it had followed other gods, you know, I think it would have been a lot more interesting. Maybe it went to like the God of War or something, or I don't know, Poseidon, or just any of those other characters and like do a spin of it too. I think I would have read the series, but it just follows Hades and Persephone and I do not care. So as much as I enjoyed the first book, I'm not going to be finishing the series. I think I'm just going to one and done it. I think it was fine. Okay, and then because I was enjoying my audiobooks so much, I tried to read Rhapsodic, also an audiobook. This is by Laura Thalassa. Now I really tried. I think I listened to about 20, maybe 25% of this book. It was very, very boring and repetitive, and there was not a lot of tension because how can I, it's kind of like a second chance romance, but it's also not, because they didn't really, like, I don't know the story. I don't really know what happened or whatever, but it goes back in the past all the time. So we're like 7 years ahead, and then it goes back to when she was a 16-year-old and he was this, I don't know, 100 and something year old. I'm assuming he's in his 100s. I don't know how old this guy is. So he is a fae, from what I understand, and she is a siren. Something to do with that. And there's also a werewolf in the story that she's hanging out with, but she decides to end things, but he gets very upset. I don't quite get the world, because there was no explanation of it whatsoever, because they do live there. It's like they live in modern world. They, like, she goes to the Isle of Man or the Isle of Wight. She goes to the Isle of Wight and she goes to college. But she learns about magical stuff. I don't know. It was a world that I didn't really grasp. But my biggest problem was the age thing. So when she's 16, she calls up, like, he's the bargainer. So let me try to explain from my understanding of what little I read of this book. So he is called a bargainer. His real name is Desmond, which is not a very attractive name. No offense to anyone Desmonds out there. So he is a bargainer. So he, people wish upon him. He grants them the wish, but then they have to give, like, they have to, like, give something back. It's like a owe it thing. And she ends up killing her stepfather when she's 16. And she wants him to help her cover it up. This is the beginning of the story, so it's not really like a spoiler. Obviously, I haven't read the whole book, so I don't even know what a spoiler is at this point. And he does. And then you kind of, you like, the story goes back and forth in terms of, like, the timelines, which is fine, but it was just kind of repetitive and annoying. And you kind of find out that she has, like, over 300 basically IOUs to this bargainer, because she's, like, asked him to come see her so many times, because she basically has this crush on him. She's a 16-year-old, has a crush on this man. And in the book, it clearly says, I remember two times it said this, oh, in today's world, 16 is the legal age. It had little references like that to make me as a reader think, oh, okay, this is okay then. This is okay that he's grooming her. It's okay. And no, I'm not okay with that. I was not okay with it. I just felt icky. Like, I'd never read anywhere where they got together when she was 16, but they got very, very close. And it's alluded to that they kissed, or they tried to kiss, or something happened. And then that's why they haven't seen each other in like 7 years or something like that. I don't really know. So I just was so grossed out. I couldn't get behind it. It might be a fun story to listen to, but also just felt it was repetitive. It was just all about her gushing over him. And he also calls her little cherub. Little cherub. Come on. That is not sexy. That is really, like, repulsive. I'm sorry, but I just thought it was gross. Like, why did the author make her 16? Like, just make her of legal age, please. Or just, like, in her 20s. Come on. Why is everyone so young? It just grosses me out sometimes. I don't know. No. I didn't like it. Okay, next up, I actually read a physical book. Woohoo! So this is The Dagger and the Flame by Catherine Doyle, and I gave this a 5-star. I really, really enjoyed it. I kind of knew it was going to be a 5-star. I don't know why I knew this. I put it in my 5-star predictions, and it was a 5-star. So I have some other ones. Maybe I should just read those from now on, stop reading all these crap books. But sometimes I don't want to read a 5-star. You know what it is? Sometimes you have to be in the mood. You have to be wanting it to be a 5-star. I think ultimately this could be a 4.5. I'm going to be honest with you, but I gave it a 5-star. I've been reading such crap books. And I also did a vlog where I'm trying to find a 5-star, and this gave me 5-star vibes. So I'm going to go with it. It is young adult as well, and I feel like I rate pretty high for young adult. I think I give them a little bit more leniency as opposed to if it's an adult book. I don't know why I do that, but I tend to rate upwards slightly. And so I just thought this was a sweet book, and it definitely, I'm not a fan. I've said this a couple of times. I'm not a fan of Crescent City from Sarah J Maas, but it reminded me of Crescent City. I gave that 2-star, that book. This one I gave a 5-star. It's about this girl who basically ends up, so it's kind of hard to explain, really. There's like these two groups of people, and then there is a substance that they take in this world called the shade. And so the daggers they drink the shade, and it consumes them and gives them little tattoos on their skin and eats away at their soul slowly, very slowly. And it gives them this like godlike power as killers and be able to like kill people in under 10 seconds and be really ruthless and, you know, not feel pain and things like that. It just ultimately like gives them like godlike power for a few hours. And so obviously some of them become addicted to it and things like that. And they, you know, so he is a dagger and she is the flame. Now she joins a group called the Cloaks, and they use the shade to weave into their clothing and their weapons and stuff. And it's all to do with hiding in the shadows as well. Like this whole thing of hiding in the shadows and getting out of the light and stuff. Regardless of all that, it's basically an enemies to lovers. It's a little bit of a slow burn, but not really. I really, really enjoyed it. And I liked the world in it too. I liked the magic in it. I thought it was quite interesting. I don't think it is hugely original. I will give it that. It's not a story that you haven't read before, but I think because it's a story that I feel like I've read before, I just ultimately enjoyed it. I thought it was done pretty well. I like the side characters. I rarely like the side characters in these books, and I really, really did. The only thing I will say is the ending was like, wah, wah. I know why they did that in the ending, but it's not the ending that I wanted, but it sets it up well for, you know, the next book and makes it a little bit interesting to see where it goes from there. But I don't know when the next book's going to come out because obviously this is a brand new book. So I really, really enjoyed it. And if you have it, I got this from Fairy Loot. So obviously anyone who's got Fairy Loot and getting the adult books, getting the YA books would have got it. But I thought it was really fun. And, you know, there's like monsters and stuff and, you know, stuff like that. So I thought it was fun. Okay, and then the last book that I read is The Whistling by Rebecca Netley. So this is it's supposed to be like a gothic horror novel, or like a gothic mystery novel. It was fine. It took me a really long time to read this. I think I started it in October and I finished it right at the tippy end of November. I think like the last day of November I finished it. It just wasn't a very memorable book. Like I started reading it, it's very easy to read, but I read like a few pages at a time, put it down and read something else. It never like got me hooked from page one. And I think that's ultimately the problem with the writing or like the story itself. It definitely felt like it had the gothic spooky vibes at certain points. It is about a woman who comes to become a nanny for this girl who hasn't spoken since the death of her brother. And she's basically an orphan because her parents are gone too. And she's living with her aunt on this little island in Scotland in this, you know, house. It is in the 19th century. So it definitely has like the vibes to it. There's like stuff about witches and things. And you're not really like ghosts and witches, and you're not really sure who to believe, who to trust. There's like no specific, I mean, there is a little bit, there is a twist to this, but not really. Like, it's like, oh, okay. Like I never felt like, oh my gosh, you know, when I'm reading this, I felt like, oh, okay, that's what we did. Okay. That's ultimately how I felt. So I just gave it a 3-star. I just don't think it's very memorable. I'm not even sure if I really will keep this in my collection. I don't think it's something that I would recommend to anyone reading. Even though I'm giving it a 3, I just think it's really just mediocre, like very middle of the road. But I don't think it's like a 2, 2.5. I think it's just like a 3. It's fine. It's fine. Like, that's kind of my rating for 3s. But sometimes 3s can be good. So I don't know. When I was reading it, I didn't not like it. I just never loved it. So anyway, that's what I read. So those are all the books that I read in November, and obviously DNF'd as well. I haven't read anything this month so far. I mean, I've DNF'd some books, some more audiobooks. Maybe audiobooks are not the way for me. Yeah, I've DNF'd 2 audiobooks so far this month. and I'm actually trying to read 4 books at the moment. So maybe that's why I haven't finished anything, so I'm trying to read too much, which is maybe not helping me. But yeah, anyway, thank you so much. I will be having a best books that I've read this year and a worst books video that I'm going to be posting soon. And also, as I said, my unhaul video. So if you're interested in those, obviously subscribe and stay tuned. Otherwise, thank you so much, and I'll see you all next time. Bye.